23:24 Universal Time coordinated a duty forecaster at the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Honolulu, Hawaii, was sitting in front of a wall of monitors when the number on his screen changed. He had been watching the DART buoy network, 8 sensor platforms anchored to the floor of the Pacific Ocean, each one measuring changes in water pressure to a precision of 1 millimeter. The buoys sit silent for months at a time. Most shifts at the PTWC are quiet. You watch the numbers, you run the protocols, and nothing happens. That night, something happened. The DART buoy closest to Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, Station 21413, positioned 1,200 kilometers northeast of Japan, recorded a pressure spike of 0.9 meters. In deep water, that number, 0.9 meters on a deep ocean sensor, was the second largest DART amplitude ever recorded since the program began. The instrument had never seen anything close to this. The forecaster didn't need to run the calculation twice. He already knew what 0.9 meters in deep water becomes when it hits a coastline. He issued the highest level tsunami warning across the entire Pacific Basin. Not an advisory, not a watch, a full warning. The kind of warning that, in Hawaii, means one thing: get off coast right now. What he had just detected was the aftershock of something that had happened 22 minutes earlier, 4,000 kilometers away, at the bottom of the ocean. And it was already moving toward every coastline in the Pacific at 800 kilometers per hour. 22 minutes before that forecaster looked at his screen, the floor of the Pacific Ocean broke. Not cracked, not shifted, broke. A fault zone 500 kilometers long and 150 kilometers wide, roughly the distance from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and twice as wide, ruptured along the Kurilchevskaya Subduction Zone at a depth of 20.7 kilometers. This is the boundary where the Pacific Plate grinds northwest beneath the Okhotsk microplate at 79 millimeters per year. It had been doing that for millions of years. At 23:24 Universal Time coordinated, it stopped grinding and started moving all at once. The USGS assigned it a magnitude of 8.8. That number requires context. The scale is not linear. Every full point represents 31 times more energy than the one before it. An 8.8 is not slightly stronger than an 8.0. It is 478 times more powerful. The energy released in those 4 minutes and 12 seconds was equivalent to 32,000 nuclear bombs detonating simultaneously at the bottom of the ocean. The last earthquake of this magnitude anywhere on Earth had been the 2011 Tohoku disaster, the one that killed nearly 16,000 people and triggered the Fukushima nuclear meltdown. Before that, you had to go back to 1952, to this exact same fault zone, to a tsunami that sent 12-meter waves crashing through the city of Severo-Kurilsk and erased it from the map. 73 years later, the same fault had broken again. In Severo-Kurilsk, a fishing city of 2,500 people on Paramusher Island, 180 kilometers from the epicenter, the tsunami arrived before any warning could reach the port. There was no time for sirens. There was barely time to run. The first wave came in at 19 meters, a 6-story wall of water moving at the speed of a freight train through the waterfront district. Fishing boats that had been tied to their moorings were picked up whole and carried 3 city blocks inland. Steel shipping containers, each one weighing 20 tons, were thrown like empty boxes. The port, the economic center of the entire city, was destroyed in under 4 minutes. Drone footage released by the Russian Academy of Sciences showed the aftermath from above. Streets filled with debris, boats sitting on top of collapsed buildings, the waterfront simply gone. Nearly 300 people had managed to reach higher ground before the second wave arrived. The second wave was larger than the first. At the same moment, 15,584 feet above sea level, the Klyuchevskaya Sopka volcano, the tallest active volcano in all of Eurasia, responded to 4 minutes of continuous ground shaking the way volcanologists had been warning it might for weeks. Its crater, which had been slowly filling with fresh lava, overflowed. Russia's geophysical survey posted 2 words on Telegram: "It's erupting." Orange rivers of lava streamed down the western slope and were visible from 40 kilometers away. The largest earthquake in 14 years had just triggered the largest active volcano on the Eurasian continent. Both events, same fault zone, same night, 2 minutes apart. The Pacific Plate had just reminded every government bordering the ocean what it was capable of. The thing about a tsunami that most people get wrong is what it actually is. It is not a wave. Not in any sense a swimmer or a surfer would recognize. A tsunami is the entire water column, from the ocean floor to the surface, set into motion at once. In the open ocean, that column is invisible. It travels at 800 kilometers per hour and rises less than a meter above normal sea level. A ship sitting directly on top of it would not feel it pass. The danger is not visible from the surface until it is too late to do anything about it. What makes it lethal is what happens when that invisible column hits land. When the ocean floor rises toward a coastline and the water has nowhere to go but up, Decades of accumulated kinetic energy compresses into a vertical wall. In Severo-Kurilsk, that wall was 19 meters high. It didn't break and recede like a beach wave. Kept moving. Through streets, through buildings, through everything until the energy finally ran out. And it was still moving. East, across the Pacific. Toward Japan, toward Hawaii, toward the west coast of the United States. At 800 kilometers per hour. Invisible. In Tokyo, Japan's chief cabinet secretary interrupted a live press conference 31 minutes after the earthquake to announce mandatory coastal evacuations. The order covered the entire Pacific coast of Japan. Traffic jams formed on every highway leading inland within minutes of the announcement. At the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, the same facility that had partially melted down during the 2011 Tohoku tsunami, 4,000 workers were ordered to abandon their stations and shelter on higher ground while monitoring the reactors remotely. The release of treated radioactive wastewater into the ocean, which had been ongoing as part of the plant's long-term decommissioning process, was immediately halted. No one at Tokyo Electric Power Company wanted to be in front of a camera explaining what a tsunami would do to a nuclear decommissioning facility that was already under international scrutiny. The first wave hit Hokkaido 87 minutes after the earthquake. It measured 60 centimeters at the gauge. That number sounds manageable until you understand the physics. That 60 centimeters arrived at full ocean velocity, enough sustained current to tear a fully loaded commercial fishing vessel from its anchor and carry it into the harbor infrastructure. Japan's chief cabinet secretary told evacuees on television that they might not be able to return home by the end of the day. The waves, he said, could remain dangerous for at least 24 hours. China issued tsunami alerts for the provinces of Shanghai and Zhejiang. Typhoon Komei was already tracking toward the Zhejiang coast. Two separate disasters converging on the same coastline within hours of each other. Chinese emergency services began evacuating low-lying coastal districts in both provinces simultaneously. Tsunami warnings or watches were activated in Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Costa Rica, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Colombia. The wave hadn't crossed half the Pacific yet. It was still coming. In Honolulu, Hawaii, every cell phone on the island lit up at 1:32 p.m. local time. The emergency alert system tone, the sound that, in Hawaii, carries a specific meaning unlike anywhere else in the United States, fired simultaneously on every device in the state. People on the H1 freeway pulled over. Tourists on Waikiki Beach looked at their phones and then at the ocean. A family from Houston named the Berries had taken an excursion off their Norwegian cruise line ship to visit a volcano near Hilo when their phones started going off. Amanda Berry told reporters later she wasn't concerned at first. She was from Houston, where emergency alerts were routine and usually amounted to nothing. That changed the moment she got off the tour bus and understood what the alert actually said. Within 20 minutes of the alert, every highway leading to higher ground in coastal Oahu was in gridlock. Not the ordinary gridlock of rush hour. Every vehicle in the coastal evacuation zones attempting to reach elevation simultaneously. Bumper to bumper, sirens audible in the background. Loudspeakers mounted on emergency vehicles broadcasting the evacuation order on a loop through neighborhoods where people were still trying to decide whether to leave. Governor Josh Green appeared at a news conference and told the public what the data showed. The PTWC had recorded wave measurements at Midway Atoll, positioned directly between the epicenter and Hawaii, of 1.8 meters, peak to trough. He explained what that means for a coastline. A 1.8 meter reading in the deep ocean is not a 1.8 meter wave when it arrives at a reef-lined island chain. The shallow geography amplifies it. What reaches the shore is larger, faster, and moves inland instead of breaking and retreating. He said it was like a 90-centimeter surge riding on top of normal surf, except it has no back. It doesn't stop at the waterline. Keeps moving until something stops it. He activated Black Hawk helicopters. He prepositioned high-water rescue vehicles along the coast. Then he looked at the cameras and said, "Please do not put yourself in harm's way." The tsunami reached Hawaii's north shore at 7:30 p.m. local time, 5 hours and 58 minutes after the rupture. The first wave hit Haleiwa on Oahu and recorded 4 feet. At Kahului Harbor on Maui, the reading hit 5.7 feet, 1.74 meters, as the harbor's geometry compressed the incoming energy the way a funnel concentrates water poured through it. Boats that had not been moved from their slips were slammed into dock infrastructure. The harbor absorbed the first surge, then the second, then the third. Because tsunami waves do not arrive once. They arrive in sets like pulses, for hours. The interval between pulses at Hawaii was approximately 17 minutes. Each set slightly smaller than the last, but no less dangerous, because the currents generated between pulses are often stronger than the visible waves themselves. Invisible rip currents capable of pulling a person off their feet and into the water in under a second, with no warning and no recovery. The Hawaii Emergency Management Agency director stood in front of cameras and told evacuees not to return home. Not because the waves were still large. Because the ocean around the islands was still oscillating. Still moving. The threat doesn't end when the biggest wave passes. It ends when the water stops moving entirely. That takes hours. Sometimes longer. The tsunami crossed the remaining distance to the continental United States and reached the California coast shortly before midnight Pacific time. In Crescent City, a small coastal community near the California-Oregon border that sits inside a natural bay with the geometric misfortune of concentrating and amplifying incoming wave energy, the gauge recorded 1.13 meters. For context, the 1964 Alaskan earthquake tsunami killed 11 people in Crescent City with waves of nearly identical height. The bay does not care what year it is. It does what it always does. Takes whatever energy arrives and focuses it into the harbor. Crescent City was the last location in the United States to lift its tsunami warning, the following morning, after monitoring wave activity through the night. The National Weather Service Bay Area Office issued an alert just before midnight. Water levels at Point Reyes, 30 miles northwest of San Francisco, were fluctuating more than a foot above and below normal in rapid cycles. Not a single surge. The ocean breathing in and out through the Golden Gate, each breath large enough to kill anyone standing at the waterline. Los Angeles County lifeguard trucks patrolled Venice Beach and Santa Monica Pier in the dark, broadcasting warnings through loudspeakers to people who come to the water's edge to watch. People always come to watch. That is always when the third wave arrives. Oregon's Emergency Management Agency warned that wave heights between 30 and 60 centimeters were expected along the coast beginning around 11:40 p.m. local time. 30 centimeters. 1 foot. A number that sounds survivable until you understand what it is when it arrives at 800 kilometers per hour. It is not water you can stand in. It is a horizontal current with the force of a river in flood, enough to knock a person off their feet in under a second and carry them into the water before they can react. Oregon officials said it plainly. Stay away from beaches, harbors, and marinas. Do not go to watch. By the following afternoon, most tsunami alerts across the Pacific had been lifted. The worst-case scenario had not materialized on American soil. No deaths were reported on the U.S. West Coast. Hawaii recorded no significant structural damage. The wave had been real, the warning system had worked, and the evacuation had held. But the geophysicists who spent the following weeks reconstructing what had happened pointed to something that had been sitting in data the entire time, visible to anyone who knew where to look. In the days leading up to the rupture, the Kamchatka Peninsula had been shaking. More than 50 earthquakes above magnitude 5.0 in a 10-day window. A magnitude 7.4. 3 separate magnitude 6.6 events in the days immediately following. These were not random seismic noise. They were a foreshock sequence, the fault system loading energy into the rupture zone, communicating in the only language plate tectonics knows, that something far larger was building beneath the ocean floor. Every one of those earthquakes was recorded. The data existed. The pattern, in retrospect, was unmistakable. Ross Stein, a geophysics lecturer at Stanford University, told reporters after the event that the 8.8 appeared structurally similar to the 1952 magnitude 9.0 earthquake that had last broken this same fault. He noted that 73 years was a consistent repeat interval for events of this magnitude along a megathrust boundary moving at 79 millimeters per year. The math, he said, had always suggested this was coming. Then he said something else. Something the scientists tracking the Cascadia Subduction Zone, the fault system running 1,000 kilometers off the coast of Washington, Oregon, and Northern California, have been saying for years. Megathrust faults don't give much warning. They load energy in silence for centuries. They communicate briefly in foreshocks that are easy to misread. And then, when the accumulated stress finally exceeds what the rock can hold, they release everything at once. The Cascadia fault last ruptured in the year 1700. At a magnitude estimated between 8.7 and 9.2, it has been loading energy every day since. Scientists estimate the probability of a major Cascadia rupture within the next 50 years at roughly 1 in 3. Tonight, the Pacific Ocean sent a wave across 4,000 miles of open water and knocked on the door of every coastline in the United States. It was not the biggest wave the Pacific can generate. It was not the closest fault to American soil. It was a reminder, measured in feet and seconds and evacuation gridlock on the H1 freeway, of what happens when a megathrust fault finally decides it has waited long enough.